If the pipe of your house bursts, if your car breaks down, or the laptop that you use for work is broken, and you're forced to spend money to fix all of that, are you able to do so without affecting your budget? If no, this video is definitely for you. If yes, stay tuned because this video can still be for you.
Hello guys, welcome back to our channel. We are so excited to be here today. As you saw earlier, today's topic is going to be emergency fund.
Exactly. We will discuss everything that you have to know about it, plus how to build it, how to really take action and start finally building your emergency fund. So if you're really interested in the topic, come with us. So first of all, what is an emergency fund? Well, it's a sum of money that you keep aside saved, that it's available for you 24/7, and you just use in case an unexpected event happens. Just like the first aid kit that you have at home, guys. You know where it is, you hope you'll never use it, but in case anything happens, you just go and grab it. Now, how to calculate your emergency fund? I guess this is the most crucial part of all of it, because you have to know how much you put aside to save it. Actually, it's pretty simple. First, just calculate your monthly expenses. After calculate your monthly expenses, get an average out of that. And then you multiply this number between 6 to 12 months. So let's say you have 1,800 of monthly expenses. Now, one thing that it's always good to do is to round up, just to be safe. So 1,800, we round up to 2,000. So you get this 2,000 and you multiply between 6 to 12 months, which is between 12,000 and 24,000. And why this range? Well, we like to break down into two categories. The first category is when your income is more foreseeable, more predictable. So you can keep 6 months of your monthly expenses. Like if you're an employee or a contractor, it's kind of easy to know how much you make at the end of the month. So in that case, 6 months. The second category is for those who have a less predictable income. Like if you're a businessman or self-employed that have a more variable income, which in 1 month you can make nothing, and then after 3 months you make $20,000, then we suggest to keep 12 months of your cost of living. However, it's totally up to you guys. If you're self-employed and you want to keep 6 months saved in your emergency fund, that's okay. If you're an employee and you want to keep between 10 to 12 months of the cost of your living, that's okay too. In our case, we keep 6 months worth of our cost of living. Where to keep your emergency fund? Well, you have to keep in mind 3 things. A, liquidity. Your money needs to be available for you 24/7 in cash. So you cannot put a property of yours as an emergency fund, because if anything were to happen and you need cash right away, it will be kind of hard to sell your property and get this cash in like just 1 day. B, you want a low risk. You want to protect your money in case your financial institution goes bankrupt, for example. So make sure to have CDIC insurance or FDIC insurance. Also, you don't want your emergency fund to fluctuate a lot. So you will not put it in cryptocurrency, for example, that in 1 day it can value $20,000 and the other day 25 or maybe $15,000. That's not the idea. You can make money, but you can also lose a lot. C, profitability. Because the risk is low, you will get a low to medium profitability. And actually, you just want beat the inflation, or at least get as close as possible so you keep the same value of your money. Some examples of where you can keep your emergency fund are high interest savings account, money market account, that it's very similar to high interest savings account, but it can come with some fees or minimum balance, and GICs, Guarantee Investment Certificate. Now, this last one is tricky because some GICs you can cash before the maturity date without paying any penalty, but usually there are some penalties. And now maybe you're asking, why do you suggest GICs? So the tricky here on GICs is to invest part of your emergency fund and not all of it. So let's say you have 12 months of your cost of living, and then you can get 3 months of it and put in a 3 months term GIC. Probably it will get a higher return than your high interest savings account or your money market account. But just make sure to not put more than 50% of your emergency fund in GICs, because if anything were to happen, like let's say a pandemic, and you lose your job and you need this emergency fund, you want it to be available.
So we have gone through what is an emergency fund, how to calculate it, and where to keep it. But now, how do you start building your emergency fund? How do you start saving up? Well, there are 3 scenarios that you have to keep in mind and see where do you fall. Scenario number 1 will be if your income is greater than your expenses. This is pretty simple. You can save up as much as you want or as much as you can, but you could also follow the next tip that we're gonna give you. If you fall in the scenario number 2, which is your expenses are greater than your income, then there's this tip that we have. You want to divide your expenses into 4 different categories. So category number 1 will be fixed and essential expenses. These are expenses that are recurrent and are for the same amount and that are essential for your living. So for example, rent, insurance, and in our case, internet, because we use it for work. Category number 2 would be fixed and non-essential expenses. So this will be pretty much all of these subscriptions or memberships that are the same, you pay the same price every single month, but they're not essential to you. They do not affect directly your well-being if you did not have them. The third category would be variable and essential expenses. So these are expenses that vary depending on how much you consume or use them. And this could be food, utilities, transportation, things like this. And the fourth and last category would be variable and non-essential expenses. So literally anything that you don't need, that you just decide to spend money on, will fall in here. So extra clothing, new video games, fancy TVs or smartphones, anything like that that you don't really need for you to live. And why do we give you this tip? Well, because by categorizing your expenses, you can easily tackle them and cut the ones that you need to cut. Now, the first that you want to tackle are the non-essential, because they're not essential. So it's easier for you to decide what you can just ditch or what you decide to keep. Secondly, you want to tackle your variable and essential expenses. Why? Because you can manage this. You, for example, could decide to switch food brands so you spend a little bit less, or you can manage the consumption of water or electricity in your house, or you could decide to walk more this month and not spend on transportation or drive less. Really, it can be little simple things or like small reductions that may not seem too much, but once you add them all up, it can be a lot. And lastly, you will tackle your fixed and essential expenses. Now, this is tricky because the chances that you can change this are very low. If it's ultimately necessary, you could move. You could sell your house or anything like that. But it all depends on your negotiating skills, like Peter says. If you're really good at it, maybe you could get a better deal in your insurance or your rent. And if you're really in need, then you could try. Scenario number 3 will be your income equals your expenses. Maybe you were just on scenario number 2, and after you did the breakdown, you ended up like this. Then our tip will be go through the breakdown again and cut more. But most importantly, find out why this is happening. If you see that your expenses are somewhat reasonable, if you're not expending like crazy or you're not going overboard, then maybe your income is just too low. In which case, we would suggest find a better or higher income. And also invest in yourself. I know this sounds a little bit contradictory because you probably don't have that much money. If you don't have money to save for your emergency fund, then maybe you're wondering, how would I have money to invest in myself? Well, sometimes it's better to invest in yourself before starting an emergency fund, because that way you will be guaranteed to earn more, to make more. And in the long term, that's a better option. But if after going through the breakdown again and realizing that you cannot cut any more of your expenses, and if you are not able to find a better or higher income, then maybe you could sell extra clothes or video games or extra shoes that you don't wear, or you could put your skills to practice and offer it for a price. Literally anything that will bring you an extra income. Just get creative. Just like they say, where there's a will, there's a way. If you need extra money, you'll probably find a way to make extra money. Now, an extra scenario. What happens if you have debt? Like me. It happened to me. I'm not proud. But there's still a way for you to build and save for your emergency fund. So, there are 2 things that can happen. You can have a small debt, in which case we suggest that you tackle first. So pay your debt first and then start saving for your emergency fund. And why do you want to pay for your debt first before building your emergency fund? Well, because of interest. So if you don't pay for your debt and you start building your emergency fund, then the interest is going to grow and grow and grow. And then it's going to be massive and awful. And even if you do pay, but you pay the minimum, then you're going to be paying interest forever, which is not the idea. You don't want to have debt. You don't want to be giving your money away to the banks. They don't need it. They already have enough. Now, what if it's a huge debt, a massive debt that you're going to be stuck with for a while? Well, in this case, you are going to tackle both at the same time. So you're going to pay your debt and save for your emergency fund at the same time. And because it's a long-term debt, you're probably going to be stuck with it for a long time. And you don't want to be living paycheck by paycheck outside of paying your debt. So you want to pay your debt to the point that it will prevent it from growing, but at the same time you want to save money and have it there for you in case anything were to happen. You actually want the debt to go down, which is why you have to make sure that you pay not just the interest, but also a little bit of the principal. That way it goes down, and at the same time your interest goes down a little bit. I, for example, had to borrow money. Well, had to because I didn't have an emergency fund back then. And I was clueless. I didn't know. So I just borrowed money. Lots of it. From all the different banks that you could think of. And then I was stuck with this debt that it wasn't that massive, but it definitely affected me. And I was not paying a lot of the principal. So I was just paying interest and interest and interest. And years went by, and I never saved for my emergency fund until recently. So learn from me. Don't make the same mistake. And it wasn't until then, until it was in that position, that I realized how important it is to have an emergency fund. And it is so important because you want to be safe. You want to be stress-free. You don't want to have to borrow money from banks or other people, but yourself. You can just borrow money from yourself and pay yourself back at no interest. And most importantly, you'll be one step closer to your financial freedom.
Now that you haven't listened to all of that, it's time to ask yourself, when will I use the emergency fund? Is the new iPhone an emergency? Is the PlayStation 5 an emergency? Is the new Xbox an emergency? Is your trip to Maldives an emergency?
Maybe.
No, it's not. Don't make me go after you and beat you up. Be smart. As we mentioned in the beginning of this video, an emergency would be if a pipe bursts in your house, your car breaks down, you drop your laptop that you use to work, not that you use for video games, unless you make money out of that. Things like that. You will know what is an emergency. Just be smart, be realistic. Please don't spend your money on superfluous things that just bring temporary pleasure. And remember, the biggest pleasure is to be financially free. To know that if anything were to happen, you will be covered.
Alright, so that's it for this video, guys. We really hope you enjoyed it and that you got the most out of it, of course, and that you really put in practice all of these tips, because we try really hard.
And don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button, share with your family and friends, and activate the notification for future videos. And see you next time!